Fox News alert: sports and politics colliding in a major way over the weekend after President Trump slammed NFL players who don't stand during our national anthem. Those comments inspiring more than 200 players to sit, kneel, or raise their fists on Sunday. Other players and some team owners locking arms in protest. This is Outnumbered. I'm Sandra Smith. Here today, Harris Faulkner, host of Kennedy on Fox Business Kennedy, Republican strategist and Fox News contributor Lisa Booth, and today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, former Utah Congressman and Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz is here, and he is outnumbered. And I said, I can't wait to get your response to the weekend, but save it for TV.
All right.
So we're going to get right to it.
Are we on?
Welcome, and we're really glad you're here, and you just can't talk yet.
Okay.
All right. Let's begin. Football taking a backseat to politics on NFL Sunday. Hundreds of players from coast to coast kneeling or locking arms in protest of the president, saying that those who take a knee during the anthem ought to be fired. But one of the remarkable exceptions, Alejandro Villanueva of the Pittsburgh Steelers, the former Army Ranger who served 3 tours in Afghanistan and received a Bronze Star, standing outside the team tunnel, hand over his heart, as his teammates remained in the locker room. Meantime, President Trump doubled down on his remarks on Twitter over the weekend and defending his comments as he made his way back to the White House yesterday afternoon.
I think it's very disrespectful to our country. I think it's very, very disrespectful to our flag. We have great people representing our country, especially our soldiers, our first responders, and they should be treated with respect. This has nothing to do with race or anything else. This has to do with respect for our country and respect for our flag.
The president's remarks stirring a fiery and passionate response from current and former players. Watch.
I think the president's words are real divisive. I don't like the hate speech that is coming out of his mouth. Neither do the players in the locker room.
Yesterday, this was a group of our family got attacked for what we feel is demonstrating our First Amendment right.
It's bigger than me. I got a daughter. She's going to have to live in this world. You know what I'm saying? And I'm going to do whatever I got to do to make sure, you know, she can look at my dad, look at her dad and be like, hey, we did something, we tried to make a change. You feel me?
That's right.
But President Trump, not without his supporters, who believe he's saying what needs to be said.
I think what the president is saying is that the owner should have a rule that players should have to stand in respect for the national anthem.
There are coaches across this country at high school level who are penalized and disciplined for leading their players in prayer. And yet you see an issue in the NFL where the media champions those who are taking a knee to disrespect the American flag.
I feel really sad at the cowardice of people like Roger Goodell who are going to preside over the decay of American institutions rather than take on young players.
Congressman, so what do you make of it all?
Leave it to a Ranger who's not going to let anything get between him and the flag. And I'm proud of him in doing that. We're talking about the flag. We're talking about the national anthem. What was really offensive, I think, to a lot of people is that there the NFL was in London, and they had to take a knee for the national anthem. But when the God Save the Queen comes on, what did they do? They all stood for that, and they were united. And you know what? I'm just sick of having politics everywhere. I understand there are problems in the country. I understand people have a First Amendment right. But I don't think you do that when you wear the uniform and you do the one thing in this country that unites us, and that is to respect the flag and the men and women who fought to preserve.
But some specifically took issue with the president's rhetoric in his response to all this. And Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, said this on the protests, quote, "The way we reacted today and this weekend made me proud," he said. "I'm proud of our league." The anthem protests reflected the frustration, the disappointment of the players over the divisive rhetoric we heard from President Trump. And that was in an interview with Peter King of Sports Illustrated. Kennedy?
It's been really interesting to see the reaction from some of the people who supported the president. Some of these team owners in Jacksonville and New England who are now siding with their players. And it's obviously one of those issues that has been forced to a head. It makes most people really uncomfortable because football is supposed to be escapism. It's where you're cooking chicken wings and you got a big pot of chili and you hear the national anthem and you go to root on your favorite team, and it's very difficult to escape from the politics. I respect people's right to express themselves. I really do. I think that the flag is so beautiful and so strong that it encapsulates people who have different voices and different opinions. That's fine, but the players have to realize that there is some risk here of alienating fans who absolutely love them. They love these players, they love these teams, but now there is such a division. We'll see if they can overcome that. And my ultimate question is, what is the goal of this? What do you want from this? Are there a list of demands? Is there something specific you can point to and point a direction where you can point the country? And when we get there, you'll agree that we are there, that we have achieved and accomplished something.
Harris, even Bob Kraft, somebody the president has called his friend, and he has been a supporter of this president, also saying he's deeply disappointed, saying this: I am deeply disappointed by the tone of the comments made by the president on Friday. I am proud to be associated with so many players who make such tremendous contributions and positively impacting our communities. Our players are intelligent, thoughtful, and care deeply about our community, and I support their right to peacefully affect social change and raise awareness in a manner that they feel is most impactful.
Would you allow me to yield my time first to Lisa?
Well, what really concerns me about this is there is a lot that divides us, right? We're an incredibly diverse nation with a lot of different ethnicities, race, religions, and what unites us is the fact that we're all Americans. So if the flag is now a divisive thing, what unites us? Because that is the common bond that we all share, is the fact that we are all Americans. So despite our diversities, we can all stand united behind that. So this very much concerns me. What also concerns me is somehow Colin Kaepernick became the face of oppression. He became this liberal icon, a guy who wears socks that depicts cops as pigs. And that concerns me, that somehow this guy, who's making tens of millions of dollars to play a sport, who is literally emblematic of the economic mobility that we have in this country, that you can become, a multimillionaire. There's all these opportunities in the United States, almost the opposite of what he is protesting. And it just concerns me. And I think President Trump is tripling down on an issue that, if you look at polling, Reuters did a poll after the Colin Kaepernick thing, finding that 72% of Americans find this unpatriotic. So I think he's really hunkering down on an issue that Americans truly, really, really care about.
All right. So you're from Chicago, and I looked up some details this morning that were very disturbing, and you and I talk about this all the time. Look, you can take a knee. It worked for Dr. King. I looked for this picture and found it again this weekend, and now I'm seeing people are replicating versions of it. If we can put it up. Taking a knee in prayer was something that Dr. King did during the Civil Rights Movement. This is not fresh or new. It is very effective for some times. So in Chicago, I looked from June 21st to September 21st, just a summer season. 216 people shot and some killed. I want to look down at my phone. Now, those are the deaths in that period of time. 80% projected to be African American based on the statistics we know from previous years. If there are people who are dying of gun violence, it is happening in droves in your former home city. We talk about it. If you're going to take a knee, why don't you go to the streets of Chicago and do what Dr. King did so effectively? His older daughter was tweeting about it this weekend. Bernice King, my father did this and it worked. That is a cause and a venue worth doing. I'm wondering why we're doing it in the stadiums of escapism, as Kennedy put it. Why is it happening there? Why shouldn't it be happening on the streets? And whether it's death by cop, death by neighbor, death by whatever, it's happening in droves in the city of Chicago.
You know who says they're not okay with this is some of the NASCAR team owners we've heard speak out. This is one of them, Richard Childress. He said this, and sort of a warning to anybody who might do this in their venue. Get a ride on the Greyhound bus when the national anthem is over, I told them. Anyone who works for me should respect the country we live in. So many people have given their lives for it. This is America. To which the president responded directly to that, saying, so proud of NASCAR and its supporters and fans. They won't put up with disrespecting our country or our flag. They said it loud and clear. Congressman?
It is wholly American to disagree with your president and vocalize that. But there's just 2 minutes during an NFL game where we stand united and we salute the flag, we take off our hat, And shame on those that are teaching these young kids that, you know, we go to these schools and they don't say the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, we'll just do that once a week. You know, we can't do this, and you can't say a prayer, and you
can't say God.
And the president probably overspoke in his sentencing, calling them SOBs. My goodness, take another venue, use the power that you have in the money that you make and the celebrity that you have, and put it to good use. But stand up for the United States of America, and that's why millions of Americans aren't going to watch, they aren't going to show up, and when the president is standing with the flag, he's going to win that argument every time.
So why is it, Kennedy, do you think that we can't talk about black-on-black crime? Because that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about what they're taking a knee for right now in the NFL. I'm talking about the total picture. If Black Lives Matter, why don't they matter as much in Chicago?
Well, you know, and maybe that could be a mission statement for a foundation that Colin Kaepernick and various players join. And my only request is that you make it something specific. If you want criminal justice reform and you want to see pieces of bipartisan legislation, I think that is, in fact, a worthy cause. But, you know, when you make it so obtuse and divisive, I just don't know where it ends. I mean, what is the point? Is it to make sure we don't play the national anthem before sporting events? Is it to make sure that we...
It wasn't played when people were being shot down in the city of Chicago.
That we shatter organized sports? Because, you know, on one hand, yeah, it's absolutely true. People are going to stop watching football. On one hand, because the protests make them uncomfortable, and maybe those uncomfortable discussions deserve, as you said, a different venue on a different day. The other thing is you have a lot of younger kids who aren't playing football now because of what their parents know about CTE, and that combined spells bad news for the league.
This may spread beyond the NFL. We don't know, but we do have this image, if we can show it real quick, the picture of the first Major League Baseball player to take a knee. This is Oakland A's catcher Bruce Maxwell. So, Congressman, as we see that image, you start to wonder where this goes.
No, you really wonder what it is they're trying to. If you're going to make your message, don't do it during the national anthem. That's what's offending a lot of people. You know, we had a good cross section of NFL players that came into the Judiciary Committee. I met with them, Trey Gowdy, John Ratcliffe. We had a productive hour-and-a-half meeting about criminal justice reform and using their celebrity to help us get that legislation to the finish line. That was productive. That was actually making the ball move forward, and I wish there was more of that.
All right, the clock is ticking as Republicans attempt to save their latest bill to repeal Obamacare. Will some last-minute changes get them the votes they need? Plus, Hillary Clinton has been blaming everything from sexism to Russia for her 2016 election loss. But now a former Bill Clinton pollster says time for Hillary to look in the mirror. What he says really happened.
Fox News alert, Republicans are pushing ahead in their latest attempt to repeal Obamacare as they reach a major crossroads. The Senate Finance Committee is set to hold a hearing today, in just a couple of hours, on the Graham-Cassidy bill, which underwent last-minute changes over the weekend to try to bolster support for it. The CBO, Congressional Budget Office's numbers, are also expected to be released, and there'll be a partial analysis of the plan, which would give the states more control over health care through block grants. But right now, 3 GOP senators are a no. Rand Paul, John McCain, Ted Cruz. 3 are possible no's. Lisa Murkowski, Mike Lee, and Susan Collins. The revised bill sends more funding to the states of key holdout senators like Maine, where Collins is from. But the senator did not appear any closer to lending her support. This was yesterday.
It is hard for me to envision getting to yes on this bill because my concerns are so fundamental. A program which does need reform, but we need careful reform. And I don't think this bill does that.
Democrats are also stepping up their opposition. I don't know if that's really news. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer yesterday said this, quote, this bill would throw our health insurance system into chaos while raising premiums rather than making haphazard last-minute changes to a partisan bill that won't be scored by the CBO in time for a vote. We should resume the bipartisan negotiations, end quote. But President Trump, while raising concern about the delays, says he believes Republicans will eventually fulfill their promise to voters on health care. Watch.
I mean, I've been watching for 7 years as the Republicans have been saying repeal and replace. Then you have John McCain voting no for whatever reason. And by the way, Arizona is one of the biggest beneficiaries. Even the governor, Ducey, is totally in favor of it. It's also great for Maine. It's also great for Alaska. Every state you're talking about, it happens to be particularly good for. So I don't know what they're doing, but you know what? Eventually we'll win, whether it's now or later.
I'll tell you, from what I'm reading, unless you've been day drinking, I don't think that you're going to see Democrats come across in droves. They are hunkering down.
Oh, look, here's the problem. The first vote, what people need to realize, the very first vote that they're taking on this is a motion to proceed. The question is, should they actually debate this? I don't know how any senator...
it could die right there.
I don't know how any senator can justify voting no, because if you pass that, then you can offer amendments, you can do other things to adjust the bill. The reason they're trying to slam it in before the end of September is by law they were supposed to pass a budget by April 15th. They haven't passed a budget. So when you don't pass a budget, guess what? You can't use the reconciliation tool. That tool allows you to only have to get 50 votes. So that expires at the end of September. Then they have to get to the 60 vote threshold. But if they would have passed it back when they were supposed to, then we wouldn't have had
When it was only 7 years after, now it's 7.5.
Yes.
Lisa?
I know. It is pretty ridiculous. And I think the Republican Party made a fatal error in not leading off the gate with a bill ready to go, because I think there was a vacuum where the Democrat Party was able to really soil efforts of the Republican Party. And there was a vacuum where there was a lack of information out there about anything specific that the Republican Party was able to do. And it allowed the Democrat Party to go out there, hit the drumbeat, and, you know, go off with all this messaging against any efforts of the Republican Party. But you really see them trying to court these either no's or potential no's, as you had mentioned, offering additional funding to states like Alaska for Senator Murkowski, even
sweetening the deal.
Specifically,
and
loosening
so
insurance regulations for cruise.
And I don't get that sweetener.
I call it I call it a bribe, but you know.
Oh, well, bribe, I mean, that's even loosening insurance regulations as well for cruise and lease. So we see them sort of trying to throw it all out there.
Congressman, that's because you like to call it what it is.
Well, it is. It's a bribe. It's like the corn Husker kickback that they tried to do.
It's been a while since I've heard the word soil as a verb.
I'm just saying they're doing this.
It is an interesting way to look at it, though, and very accurate.
Yeah, well,
it's interesting because I was talking to my mom this weekend, and she said, "Do you really think there's going to be a third party?" I said, "No, I think there's going to be four parties, because I think there's such massive chasms in both the Democratic and the Republican Party. I don't think Republicans, with this narrow of a majority in the Senate, can actually come up with something. A, B, I don't think they want to. And C, every time they go for another at-bat, they are giving Democrats cover. Because if they had started, I disagree with you. I think if they had started with tax reform, I think if they had a strong tax bill and came out of the gate with taxes and then passed that and said, this is how you do it, and threw some
That's looking back, and they have to look forward.
And they do have to look forward, but there's no way they can get together to move forward.
They are introducing, supposedly, the tax reform package on Wednesday. I talked to rank and file members of Congress. They have no idea what's coming forward. In fact, on Wednesday, they're not voting so that the House Republicans can go to the Navy Yard to have a discussion about what should be in the tax reform package. At the same time, the president's trying to unveil it.
Wow. And also, well, I was going to say, looking ahead to the 2018 midterm elections are about getting your base excited, coming out to support you. And if Republicans have said we're going to do all these things and they don't do any of those things, how is anyone going to be excited to come out and support them?
That's where the timing's so critical. If the president's saying we're going to get a win on health care, whether it's now or later, that's a big difference, whether it's now or later.
Right? I'm looking at the Dow, which is something that we talk about a lot here on the couch in the noon hour as things kind of hinge. Sandra, I just want to pick your brain a little bit.
That doesn't tell me anything.
It's okay?
That's a mere less than 0.5% drop when a Dow's at 22,000. 100-point
It's really been hovering there for quite a while, and I think any sort of a dip might be reaction to North Korea more than anything.
Well, one thing that I've heard you say is that if the president doesn't get the tax reform and some of these policies, that's where we may see an indication.
Yep, you can watch that for sure.
All right. Tensions reaching a fever pitch at a top, Kennedy just said it. North Korean official is now saying President Trump has declared war on his country, and that they have the right to shoot down U.S. bombers even if they're not inside North Korean airspace. How should President Trump respond to these growing threats? And the Trump administration is announcing a revised travel ban just weeks before the United States Supreme Court is set to hear arguments on that case. The new countries added to the ban. We'll take a look at that and why. And you know what we're going to do after the TV version of us wraps up? We're going to pop up online, foxnews.com/outnumbered. Click on the Overtime tab. There's a live chat waiting for you to get in on the conversation. Or you can watch us live on Facebook. Our handle is Outnumbered FNC. Look at the birdie on the screen. Tweet us. Tweet.
Tensions keep escalating with North Korea. A short time ago, the regime's foreign minister saying President Trump has declared war, adding Pyongyang could shoot down U.S. bombers even if they are not in the country's airspace. Over the weekend, he delivered a fiery speech at the United Nations, saying that President Trump calling Pyongyang's leader Rocket Man makes a strike against the U.S. mainland more inevitable. The president then sending a warning on Twitter. Just heard Foreign Minister of North Korea speak at UN. If he echoes thoughts of Little Rocket Man, they won't be around much longer. All this as the Pentagon announced American fighter jets and bombers had flown near North Korea, farther north of the demilitarized zone between North and South than any U.S. aircraft this century. A spokesman saying, quote, "This mission is a demonstration of U.S. resolve and a clear message that the president has many military options to defeat any threat. We are prepared to use the full range of military capabilities to defend the U.S. homeland and our allies." A lot of people scared about what happens next here and the president's rhetoric towards this country and its leader.
I think the president is actually speaking a language that they'll understand. No equivocation. You need to know exactly where the United States stands, and I think the rest of the world does as well. We're standing with Japan. We're standing with South Korea. You've seen the new prime minister there in South Korea take a different, President Moon, I should say, take a little bit different stance. He was much more dovish. He's a bit more hawkish now, realizing the proximity between Seoul and the demilitarized zone. It's a very short distance. You can drive it, and I've been in a helicopter right over that area. We're talking about a very, very small distance, but it's also a message to China about how serious we are, and it does put pressure on China. If they don't want to see a massive wave of people trying to come north into China to flee North Korea, they need to be engaged on this, and I think the president's speaking the right language.
So are we taking the right strategy?
Yes, and I was looking back, so it's kind of so they're saying that the president's rhetoric is an act of war. You know what else they said was an act of war? Seth Rogen's movie, The Interview. They said that was also an act of war. So I don't think it's the president's rhetoric that is escalating tensions. What I do think is escalating tensions is North Korea shooting over ballistic missiles over Japan twice in just recent weeks, testing a hydrogen bomb, specifically naming Guam, a U.S. territory, as a potential target. Those actions are what is escalating tensions. And I think for President Trump, what he is using is deterrence, both, as you had mentioned, flying those planes over the DMZ, and also what is escalating, and also President Trump, using sort of this rhetoric: if you attack us, we will attack you.
Wow. I don't know, the tiger in the briar patch in the movie was kind of scary, but that was really the only part. I digress.
Siegfried and Roy?
Yeah, no. In the movie that you mentioned with Seth Rogen. Sure. This whole thing, though, I'm curious to know what you think, Congressman, because when one country says we feel like you've declared war on us, normally that's followed by what they're going to do. But this wasn't like that. So what do you think Un is trying to tell us?
Well, look, I think he has a sole trajectory where he wants to achieve a nuclear capability to be able to intimidate particularly the United States and the rest of the world. I don't think these sanctions will do anything. I always wonder why they keep adding more sanctions. Why didn't we give him the maximum at the beginning and really have an effect? But I don't think that's going to affect him, because I don't think he cares, Kim Jong-un, about the people of North Korea.
The guy offs his relatives. He does not care about the people.
He's killed hundreds of people, and he is solely focused on achieving that nuclear capability. What will be interesting is if they do try to move that into the Pacific and actually test in a different place, and that will cause, General Mattis, Secretary, and others to really, General Harris or Admiral Harris, to really have to make some very tough decisions.
Kennedy?
I just think that you're seeing the escalation come from North Korea, and no one wants to see a preemptive war. And I agree with 70% of the people who've been polled in this country that no one wants us to go in without provocation. And everyone wants the provocation to stop, and China has finally gotten on board with that, with their banking and oil exports, really trying to choke off North Korea and force them to give up their nuclear program, which sadly they're not going to do. They're not going to give up their nuclear program, and that's what makes it so difficult. It's underground. Millions and millions of lives are at stake, and
some of their own, and he doesn't care.
Many of their own. I mean, you've got 25 million people in that country, and an untold hundreds of thousands in labor camps that will easily be.
Oh, so sad. The point you make, though, about this isn't like the equivalent of just a shot across the bow. That first shot is so bad that we've got to prevent it, and that gets complicated. All right, the White House is expanding its travel ban to put new restrictions on travelers from 8 countries indefinitely, including 5 covered by the previous ban, which was set to expire. It slows or limits entry to the United States for citizens of Chad, Libya, Syria, Iran, Yemen, Somalia, and North Korea, along with some from Venezuela. President Trump says it's about keeping the country safe. The changes will take effect on October 18th, so not far from now, just over a week after the U.S. Supreme Court is set to hear arguments over the legality of the second revised ban. Fox senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano says this third order accommodates previous judicial concerns.
You have argued for months the travel ban is constitutional.
Absolutely, and I base that argument on the Constitution's reposing of foreign policy exclusively in the hands of the president, and Congress giving the president the authority to ban people from countries in order to further foreign policy goals. They've added a country that's predominantly Catholic, Venezuela, a country that's predominantly atheist, North Korea, which undermines a little bit the argument that this is really a Muslim ban.
All right, so those are huge examples of the exceptions, but the ACLU is arguing it's still a Muslim ban. That's what they're still calling it. In a statement saying, quote, 6 of President Trump's targeted countries are Muslim. The fact that Trump has added North Korea with few visitors to the United States and a few government officials from Venezuela does not obfuscate the real fact that the administration's order is still a Muslim ban. President Trump's original sin of targeting Muslims cannot be cured by throwing other countries onto his enemies list, end quote. Congressman?
I don't think he was targeting just Muslims. I wish both sides would actually stop using the word ban, because it doesn't actually ban them. It just says we got to have some extreme vetting. We got to go through and understand. If you go to Libya right now on the website for the State Department and try to look up the U.S. Embassy in Libya, you're going to find that they're actually in Tunisia. Well, they kicked us out of the country. We don't even have an embassy there, let alone any way to vet anybody out of this country. I'm actually curious why the president took Sudan off the list, because I actually think Sudan and South Sudan should actually be part of this extreme vetting to try to figure out who these people are. We're just trying to figure out who they are before they come to the United States.
So did the conversation move, Kennedy, or the issue move here to become less about those who can come from countries to hurt us and more about those who we just simply need to vet, which those are not always mutually exclusive, but it seems a little different now.
Yeah, no, the ACLU is right. We don't have a lot of visitors here from North Korea, unfortunately. It's not an easy place to defect from. But I do think adding these countries to the list, and these are places where they are either having active civil wars or, where they are actively declaring war on us repeatedly on social media and at the UN day after day. But I do think it sort of neutralizes the idea that it's a Muslim ban. And remember that second executive order is set to expire before it reaches the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court is going to hear full argument on it. And now that there is a third implementation of this executive order, that may nullify having to go to the Supreme Court at all.
That's interesting.
But I also think if Australia was a state sponsor of terrorism, they could possibly be on this list as well. Because if you look at the original list of countries, both the first and second rollout that took place, all of those countries were either state sponsors of terrorism or harbors of terrorism. So, or safe havens of terrorism, rather. And my understanding about this is this has been a review by both the Homeland Security Secretary as well as DNI Director. And basically, they've then communicated with other countries what documents, what information that we need from them to feel secure about lifting, sort of these travel restrictions. And so my understanding is these countries could also be taken off of this list if they decide to comply with the United States and the documents and the information that we believe that we need to see or have to feel comfortable with changing the countries that are currently on the list.
It goes back to President Trump saying this is about our national security, and he makes his point very clear. If I can't properly vet someone coming in this country, they shouldn't be allowed to enter. Why don't you think his messaging is reaching more people and okay with more Americans who are concerned about their safety?
Well, I actually think President Trump was elected to become the president because he was going to take a tougher stance on this. I think most people, if they actually saw what happens as the so-called vetting, would be shocked at how brief these interviews are. Some of them are, maybe 10 minutes. Show me some documents. Let's go ahead and look at. And we just need to know who these people are before they come to the United States. That's not asking too much.
All right, we'll move on. Tomorrow's GOP primary runoff in Alabama could be a big test for President Trump's political clout, or not. Why analysts say the president wins, even if the candidate he supports loses.
All eyes on the state that says roll tide, Alabama, just days after President Trump stumped for Senator Luther Strange. Vice President Mike Pence will campaign for him tonight ahead of tomorrow's big Republican primary runoff. Strange is the pick of the party establishment and President Trump, while his opponent, former Alabama Supreme Court Judge Ray Moore, has the backing of more populist insurgent GOP figures like Sarah Palin and Steve Bannon. But some say Tuesday night will be a win for President Trump either way. A politics reporter for NBC News writing, quote, "If Strange wins, Trump will be credited for turning the tide, engineering an upset, and saving an incumbent, earning goodwill with GOP lawmakers. If Moore prevails, Trump will be dinged for falling short and pulling his candidate across the line, but it will be read as a sign of anti-GOP establishment strength, a movement acting in Trump's name." So, Congressman, was this intentional? Did the president purposefully pick the wrong person?
No, that's spin like there's never. I mean, come on. The president wins either way. You can't go down and campaign for somebody, send the vice president down there the day before the election. If Senator Strange, I think it was Brian Kilmeade who said that Luther Strange sounds like a rock and roll band, or probably should be the name of rock and roll. But if he loses, it's pretty hard to put a spin on it and say, well, that's actually a victory for Donald Trump.
I think it's deeper than that, because this is Steve Bannon's guy.
Exactly.
And this is Steve Bannon being able to stand up after his exit from the White House and say, this is what I was talking about. If this guy wins, Roy Moore, maybe he'll lose. But I think it's an ideological battle. I don't think it's mano a mano.
All right, so how close is it and what does it mean?
Well, it is close. Moore has been up in polling, but that has changed significantly over the past month, where Strange has been able to close the gap. I actually don't think the president loses either way here. I've seen the race being dubbed Trump versus Trump land. So it's basically his base, his group of supporters versus the candidate that he backed himself. Ultimately, whoever wins this runoff primary is going to end up winning the state. You look at President Trump winning the state over 60% in the 2016 election. Senator Shelby won 2016 with over 60% of the vote. The last time Senator Sessions had a competitive, or not even a competitive race, but a Democratic challenger, he won with over 60% of the vote. So, I think the dynamics of this are interesting, which is why it's gotten so much attention. Are there enough
Trump supporters, though, to pull those people to Luther Strange's side?
I mean, potentially. I do. I mean, you go back to August 2015, and there's 30,000 people that came out to support him in Mobile, Alabama. So I do think that the Trump brand is very strong in the state that could help Strange. But I don't think he loses either way, and the Republican Party is going to win. Do you really think that the Democrat Party, who has 10 senators running in states that President Trump won 5 by double digits, are going to want to put resources into a state that is so red and is so Trump and Republican territory? It would be a fool's errand.
There was a really interesting last sentence to the blurb that you read from this NBC politics reporter. He went on to write, "The president still remains perhaps their best and only hope in D.C. for change." This is the same politics reporter who said this is a win-win situation for Trump. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes. I mean, look, the bottom line, as Lisa that was saying that it stays in Republican control. The Democrats not even part of the conversation as to, is it even possible for them to win in the next election? And it is either way, I think, going to be a reflection that people still are fed up with Washington, D.C. They want change. The guy's only been the senator for a short amount of time, and they're already talking about getting rid of him.